Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on SI. Joey Van Zummeren, joined by Michael Stamps, as always, for an exciting episode here early in the week. A lot of stuff going on for Mizzou football and men's basketball for recruiting. And then in the second half of this episode, we are going to fire some questions at each other that we prepared beforehand for some blind question asking to put each other on the spot for Mizzou football. So I think that should be an exciting time. But starting off with the recruiting, though, Michael, especially with how this past 2 days really has gone for Mizzou football on the recruiting trail, I ask you again, as has been the conversation for the last few months for this recruiting class, are you worried? Do you have any feelings of that now? Should they be worried more so?
I think I've been cautiously optimistic as things have gone on, but this weekend I think has hurt and diminished a lot of that optimism. If I'm being perfectly honest, and I preface this, by saying that Eli Drinkwitz and his coaching staff and the building blocks of that coaching staff have done a good job developing talent from 3 stars to, your comeback, crazy story like a Cody Schrader, then your 4 and 5 star talent. They've developed people at all different levels who have come from all different levels. So I will preface what I'm about to say with that. But it obviously doesn't look great right now, right? And especially over these last 2 days, you look at the record. It was like 1-4 with guys they got compared to guys they didn't. And it sucks and is almost like disappointing in a way when there's so much social media hype and rumors that go around, and you expect them to land a guy, and then things happen behind the scenes, or maybe that's how it always was and it doesn't go the way that everyone thought it was going to go. There's 2 losses on the recruiting trail over the last few days that maybe we can go into more detail in a second, that I think are really, really, really going to hurt Missouri's recruiting class and the chance. And again, the rankings and the class rankings and the stars are all arbitrary, and it's all, subjective, and it really doesn't mean much until they're in their second or third year with the team. Right. So, when you really think about that, it might not even be the biggest deal right now, but some of these guys that they're missing on, 2 in particular, I'll just Jaden McGregory, who's one that just happened a couple hours ago for us. So I don't know when this is going to come out, but it happened at 5:30 on Monday. So that one hurts. And then Ronell Johnson over the weekend, which was really out of left field. Nobody knew when he was committing. And that was one of the biggest guys that was available. And he kept his recruitment pretty quiet, but Missouri did get an official visit, and kind of seemed like because of that they were in the driver's seat. He's a Missouri native, and he commits to Indiana seemingly out of nowhere. So there was other losses too that we can get into in a second, but those are 4-star talents, consensus 4-star talents, and not guys you want to miss out on. So I'm sure you're going to ask me here soon where they go from here, and I have been wondering the same thing over the last couple of days, and I don't know if I'm going to have a good answer for you. But in a long roundabout way, I think it is safe to sound the alarm on this recruiting class and, the stars and the class ranking and all that stuff. I'm not going to, these guys could go on to be great players and develop into the players that I would imagine the coaching staff thinks they're going to be. But at this very moment, it doesn't look all that great.
Yeah, and as far as players they lose out on, so you mentioned the 2 of them of Jaden McGregory and Ronell Johnson. They also have Keatron Harris, 3-star defensive lineman, he chose Arizona, correct?
Correct.
And he's from Arizona. And then Braxton Lindsay, who's a Bentonville, Arkansas native, just choosing BYU tonight as well. Just you hit on it a little bit, but no point in evaluating the tape on any of those players at this point. But just how much can you sum up what those 4 losses mean for this recruiting class, and also just what position it almost what corner it puts Missouri in now?
Yeah, and a name I actually forgot about is J.J. Bush, who committed to Arkansas as well, who is a kind of a swing like 3 and 4 star guy. And I mean, you kind of said it best. It does kind of put the class itself in a corner because the board is so limited, and there's 2 guys committing on Tuesday who we'll get into in a second that it's kind of hard to get a read on right now. Predictions don't favor Missouri at the moment, so I guess we don't know where that's going to go, but maybe there's some good news there. You look at the class and the guys that are committed, and obviously majority of them are on the offensive side of the ball. In fact, only 2 are on defense. Of the 10, it's Keenan Harris and Tony Forney, and I think those are 2 excellent players. But they're out of options, really. That's really all I can say. They're out of options. There's not many other spots they can pivot to at this moment in time. I mean, there's 3 or 4 other guys committing who have dates set. 2 of them tomorrow, and one of them is Joel Combe, who commits on the 9th and is a teammate of Tony Forney. Doesn't seem like that's going to go in Missouri's favor. And then Jacob Eberhardt's a Missouri native, and that's probably not going to go in Missouri's favor. There's DeMarcus Johnson, the JUCO defensive end, and we don't really know what the deal is with that. And outside of them, I mean, that you're out of options at that point, at least at the very moment. And we've seen a lot of recruiting wins come from Eli Drinkwitz in December, in November, in the thick of things when you're not thinking about recruiting, or right before signing day. I mean, you think about maybe 3 of the biggest commitments that Drinkwitz got last season: Brendan Haygood, Marquise Davis, and Javion Hilson, and Demarion Folks as well. I forgot about him. Those all come, leading into signing day, really, really close to that point. So this class is going to get bigger eventually at some point in time. It's more of a matter of when, but that's not trying to sugarcoat anything. There's no denying that these are big misses. And like I said, the stars at the end of the day don't mean that much, assuming that they can develop these guys. But there's an advantage immediately when you get those higher rated guys. They're usually more likely or more ready to play early on, and they also have certain athletic traits that are super valuable. But it's not like there are any alternatives at this point, which I think is the bigger frustration. They've exhausted all their options. So when you say which corner they've been backed into, I mean, there's nothing really left at this point. So like I said earlier, you might not want to ask me where they're going to pivot, because I don't think I have an answer for you.
Well, we can talk about the one when they had this past weekend, getting Tony Forney, and the safety. What I thought was interesting from his tape is that he did play a lot of slot corner, and so maybe they see him playing maybe they move him to corner or at the star position that Dalen Carnell plays. But what do you think of his commitment and what he adds to this class?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Did play a lot of corner, and you could see just with his general coverage ability, great man-to-man guy. I think he's a good tackler as well. And really, in general, what stood out the most to me is just a kind of a well-versed and patient, like just general decision maker, whether it's in the run or in the pass. If he's blitzing or if he's defending the run or in coverage or wherever he is, it doesn't really matter where he is. He makes a lot of really good reads. I think his hands are good in coverage, and he's not super grabby, but I don't, maybe you can speak more to this in a second. I also don't know where I kind of project him at the moment positionally. Once he gets to Columbia, but there's going to be some versatility there. And that when you look over, some of the guys in this class, there actually are a lot of guys with positional versatility. So you kind of imagine that's something that they're looking for, which is kind of fascinating. But yeah, that's really what stood out the most to me. I like his size. He's maybe a little bit on the smaller end, but not anything that's too, eye-opening. And like I said, really good decision maker. Rarely makes a bad one. I think there are things that he needs to improve on. He's definitely has a little bit to go in the run game when it comes to tackling, things like that. But I think this is a really well-rounded player that's gonna probably have a chance to play early on, assuming he stays the course.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you as far as his versatility and with his size. He's 5'11", 180. So I mean that's good for a corner. And would just have to add on more if they want him at safety or star. And I agree with you as far as his tackling. He definitely doesn't shy away from physicality, but there's definitely um, isn't all there yet, and could add on to that. So we'll see once he arrives, and obviously what the roster looks like as far as that goes. Now, on to men's basketball, which has been a little bit more exciting than last week, at least, and some possible things coming down the line here pretty soon. But first off, getting Scotty Atkinson from Wester Groves High School and the class of 2027. Um, so Dennis Gates already winning for that class before he even has a commitment in this 2026 class. It seems like this was just a player that really wanted to stay home, and that Missouri has been involved with for quite a bit now. What can you say on just the hot start for Dennis on this class here?
Yeah, you don't see that very often. He's unless something has changed over the last week, he's one of two players committed according to composite rankings in the class of 2027. And there's a Iowa State kid who's from Iowa. Excuse me, who is the other one, and they're both rated in the same range. He's number 37 player in the country and is the second best in the state of Missouri, which doesn't suck at all. He's such a fascinating player. I love left-handed point guards or combo guards. They're so fun to watch, and they kind of have a different perspective on the game, especially when it's like a pure scorer like Atkinson is, and that's what he does the best. He could do it at all three levels. He's a great shooter, very shifty and quick. 6'2", 170, so he definitely presents as likely a point guard. There's a really interesting mold of player in college and in the NBA ranks, especially that's kind of coming alive with guys like Emmanuel Quickly and Tyrese Maxey and like a Cam Thomas who are more undersized two guards. So that could also be something that Atkinson could develop into. And I say all this knowing that we have like 2 years until we get to see him play in a Missouri uniform. So a lot can happen between now and then. He can bulk up. He can still grow. He might be 6'5". I don't know by the time he gets to Columbia. So, but there is like an interesting mold of player like these guys who are in the NBA now and finding success. And they don't, they can play the point guard, but they don't purely play the point guard. But most of them played point guard in college. So that's kind of how it works. And there's a path for Atkinson to do the same, get used to handling the ball and distributing it in college, but he can kind of shift into a pure scoring role if he, were to make it to the NBA. But great scorer. This is a huge win for Dennis Gates for a variety of reasons. It's fascinating that they got him this early, but again, some guys just want to stay home. He went to Columbia for unofficial visits multiple times this last season, so if there was one guy in the 27 class who was going to do it as early as possible, it was probably going to be him. So definitely a very fun player. Going to be a fun one to watch as the class comes around. Definitely reminds you of Aaron Rowe a little bit with some of the things he can do and the shiftiness and his scoring ability, but definitely going to be a fun one to keep an eye on.
Hey, he has a documentary on Get Buckets Entertainment on YouTube and a ton of Instagram followers. So has that going for him as well. And I was just thinking of this. He'll be one of we know for sure, at least, assuming he stays committed to Missouri, that the first player we know will be in the college basketball video game coming in 28. So
I did not even think of that.
And then also for basketball, but in the 2026 class, Jason Crow Jr. is somebody that Missouri has been involved with. He's announcing his commitment on July 18th. Anything to add in on there? Any thoughts?
Except for the fact that it's completely out of left field. Not really. I said Scotty Atkinson was one of the biggest, if not the biggest commitment that Dennis Gates has landed so far. And I think you could make the case, and I would probably stand by that, unless Jason Crow Jr. commits to Missouri, and then that would completely, shift the focus to him. this is, again, really completely out of left field, but would be a beyond impressive commitment. This is a guy who is not only the sixth best player in the country, but is, having his name thrown around in lottery, NBA draft talks, and things like that. I don't, like I said, I don't really have much to say except for the fact that it's out of nowhere. Seems like it could be between Missouri and Kentucky, but again, there's not much we really know at this point. So, gonna be a fun one to keep an eye on. I guess it's gonna be an exciting 11 days to see if we can pick up any information or anything like that, and see what we can learn. But this is one that Missouri fans should keep an eye on and be excited about, because if Dennis Gates can pull this one off, then I mean, kudos to him, because that would be a monumental recruiting victory, and would probably cement him as one of the best recruiters in college basketball if he hasn't already. I don't know if he's done enough to earn that title, but this would certainly make that case for him as well.
So Missouri offered him apparently on June 8th of just this past month, according to 247 Sports Tracker. So definitely a late addition to that group. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, again, committing on June 18th, or July 18th, rather. And so on to what's next for this football class. You mentioned not a lot of other directions to turn in. You mentioned some of the upcoming commitments. You have two on Tuesday coming up with Javonte Smith, and then Adam Belgon Ali, the linebacker, Joel Kambe, the safety, Tony Forney's teammate, committing on Wednesday. So we'll have an eye on all of that on the site. So make sure you check out all of our coverage there, and then we'll be back talking on Friday to recap all that.
There actually is one more commitment that I just blanked on and remembered right now. Jackson Gates is committing on July 8th.
Right.
Doesn't look like it's going to go in Missouri's direction. But still, Missouri offered him late in the game and kind of got involved later. Didn't get an official visit in. I would be surprised if he ends up going to Missouri, but I think we've seen some crazy recruiting stuff happen over the last couple days on the negative end for Missouri. So maybe there's some positive mojo there for Jackson Gates. Likely not, but could happen.
Yeah, he's a 3-star corner on the West Coast. So we'll see what happens there. I just think it would be cool to have another Gates in Columbia. All right, on to a fun segment here that we got going on 3 questions that we have prepared for each other. Excited for this. I don't think I do well off of being thrown into the fire. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, I did. I don't know if I do either, but I've done this in the past, and it was actually ended up being a lot of fun. So,
all right, let's do this then. So I'll start off here first for you. So what, Michael? What loss, either a transfer portal player leaving or somebody that's graduating, which loss of those do you think people are not talking enough about or don't realize how much will impact the team? So people realize Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, the loss those players are presenting. What one do you think is an underrated loss?
You actually mentioned this guy's name in last week's episode, and he didn't come to mind at first for me, but it got me thinking, and it's Eddie Kelly. He seemed, from first of what we saw, like such a good locker room guy, such a good presence to have around. Everyone spoke so highly of him, but he was such an interesting contributor on that defense, and he had such unique positional size, or he could play. He played outside, obviously, but I always thought that maybe he could move inside. But he was a great athlete as well, and when he was on the field, was impactful. Eddie Kelly, and especially in such a deep defensive end room, I feel like Eddie Kelly was always able to make his presence felt, and I think it's nice to have a big run stuffer, on the outside like that. And I don't know off the top of my head if they're going to have someone, if Missouri's going to have anybody who can kind of bring that same idea. Because he was 6'4", 280, which is obviously on the bigger side for a defensive end. So I'll go with that. Yeah, I was a big fan of Eddie Kelly. I was not bummed to see him leave, but wasn't the most wasn't the most surprising move on the planet.
Yeah, that was actually my exact answer as well. I thought about ruffling people's feathers and thought about Williams Nwaneri because I do, but that's a whole other conversation about Twitter fandom and everything else. I think a lot of other people realize that it's unfortunate to not have that guy stick around.
Yeah, the other name that came to mind, and I didn't say it because I don't know if it's like too obvious, but I feel like Johnny Walker Jr. didn't always get the respect that he deserved for how incredible of a player he was. And the fans definitely loved him, and he was an incredible player, and people knew it, but I don't know if if his like name value and impact is big enough to put him on like the Luther Burden, Brady Cook level. But they're going to notice. I think people are going to notice that he's not around. So Johnny Walker, I don't know if he's big enough to fit into this conversation, but I think that's a pretty big, pretty big impact.
I agree with you on that. What do you have for me?
Okay, I'm throwing you a softball at first. I want your true and honest opinion on the question that everyone wants to know on the offensive side of the ball at the quarterback spot. There's not a quarterback named yet. Is it Beau Pribula or is it Sam Horn that we see on day one? And kind of like a part A, part B, what does the split look like if there is a split? We saw it with Brady Cook and Sam Horn. Is there a split, and is it going to be Beau Pribula that starts day one?
I think everything is telling me it's Beau Pribula day one. No, and Sam Horn doesn't play. He's not going to take a snap for Missouri this year unless Beau Pribula is injured, or if they're up by 30 in the fourth quarter. And there's been, like last week, we posted a video on Twitter talking about the competition, and a ton of people saying, well, it's stupid to even talk about there being a competition. I do think Sam Horn is going to have a shot to win this job. And I do think Sam Horn is talented enough to win the job and be a starting quarterback in the SEC. Obviously, like we mentioned even last week, I do have a lot of trepidation about recovering from Tommy John surgery. However, on the other end of that, a lot of people have said for Beau Pribula and I even said this earlier in the screen of, well, how are you going to pay a quarterback that much? From the reported number of NIL money, $1.2 million was the number that came out. How are you going to pay a guy that much and not have him start? And it's like, well, as we just, I don't think Williams Nwaneri was on a cheap deal, and they did not hesitate to say he's not ready and not play him. So I think, as much as it is coach speak for coaches to say, oh, we don't care about star rating, we don't care about how much you're being paid. It just all depends on who actually shows up. I do think there is something real to that. But at the end of the day, I think Beau Pribula is really talented, and I think he's winning this job.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was interesting, and I came to you asking to do this story on predicting the stats for the offensive and defense side of the ball. It was way harder than I ever thought it was going to be, because there's a guy like Beau Pribula who has the talent to be a great quarterback, but hasn't done it yet. Not that it's his fault, but it's hard to beat out a guy like Drew Aller at Penn State. So that kind of prompted that question, because we've been talking about how good he is and how good he could be, and that everyone knows he still has to prove himself, but he doesn't, really have much of any at all production behind his back. So I think, I agree with you 100%. I think most people probably will. I also wonder if we'd be having a different conversation if Sam Horn, didn't go through Tommy John surgery and didn't have to deal with that, because that is such a massive setback. I mean, it was the whole year, right? I mean, a whole year and then some.
Yeah, I mean, he practiced near the end of the season. I think
he did.
He was definitely throwing at the Music City Bowl practices, and then it was really the last few weeks of the season that we saw him out there. I mean, just tossing it around.
Yeah, but I would imagine he was
never.
Yes.
He was never cleared to play, and even like a few weeks ago, Drinkwitz had said, like during the spring, wasn't 100%.
Yeah. That's what I meant. That he might not even be at 100% yet. So if that doesn't happen, I'm not saying we would be having a different conversation, but certainly would be interesting. Can I ask you like a part C to this question? Is
Yeah.
there a universe where Matt Zollers takes a snap this year?
Oh man, I don't think that's the universe Missouri fans would want to
Probably
experience.
not. Probably not.
As a straight up competition, no. But like
Yeah.
even like I would say like, oh, maybe like they find him to play a Bo Prabula role that Bo played at Penn State, but like Bo Prabula can do that.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. I just wanted to keep you on your toes.
Okay, the next question I have for you. Speaking of Matt Zollers, I have
Okay.
which of the 2025 class out of that group, which of them do you think will have the most successful careers? Not with Missouri, because who knows out of this group is going to stay here, but just in general, long view, who do you think is going to have the best career?
Oh man. Yeah, that's a tough one. Um, can I give you like a? Oh my goodness. There's three names that come to mind. Okay, and I'll narrow it
Okay,
down. I'll narrow it down.
yeah,
Donovan Oleg at receiver, Jack Lang, and then Javion Hilson. And I mean, if I'm correct, I'll before I say anything else, like I feel like it's hard to really bet on a quarterback. And I think
right,
Matt Zollers is going to
yes,
be I feel like Matt Zollers is going to be a great player, whether it's at Missouri or, if he were to go somewhere else. I think he's going to be a great player and has all the tools to do so. But it's way easier for a quarterback's career to be derailed, I feel like, than any other position. Um, Javion Hilson was the highest rated recruit in the class, I believe. So that seems like the easy answer. Jack Lang is pretty darn incredible and has modern offensive tackle size. So that's maybe a name that stands out to me the most. Like he's listed as 6'8", 305 right now. I think that's probably similar. Not that I'm comparing him to Marcus Bryant. That's just the first guy that came to my mind. But he has the height and similar build to like a Marcus Bryant. And that's, I feel like, kind of the direction like NFL offensive tackles are going. And he's going to have to put on weight, obviously, every freshman and, incoming freshman has to do that. That's not a, hot take at all. But if he can do that, he's an insane athlete. So I will, I'll stake my claim on Jack Lang. I think he's a great athlete and he has the size to do so. So yeah, I'll go with Jack Lang, but I think there's a lot of different ways you could go here.
yeah. I thought Hilson, but like you said about Zollers too, like if Zollers is good, then it's Zollers. Like just because of how much quarterback, especially with recruiting, is a crapshoot. If he's successful and lives up to his potential at all, then it's him. Just because he's a quarterback, really. But yeah, I mean, if Jack Lang can start 2 or 3 years at Missouri and be a really good offensive tackle, then also offensive tackles are pretty valuable, and that's pretty impressive. All right. What do you got for me next?
Yeah, we're gonna go a recruiting class before that. So it's gonna be the true sophomores or the redshirt freshmen. Which of those guys are you excited to see play this season, and which one do you think is gonna have the largest role on this team?
That's a good question. I like James Madison. A lot of the guys I would have said for this are gone, even like guys like Jalen Brown.
Yeah.
I really like Trajan Greco. I would say out of all of them, though, I would say I'm most excited to watch Nick Rodriguez, especially just from what he showed last year. So yeah, I mean, it's really just Greco and Rodriguez and Beasley that we know that we've seen anything of, and that have stuck around. I think Jude James could be good, could be solid, but definitely excited to watch Rodriguez and see what role he can get into.
Yeah, I want to say I think there's a few really interesting players from that class that have like gained a little bit of attention from the coaching staff. Like I think we heard Eli Drinkwitz talk about Cam Keys at one point on special teams, and I'll be interested to see if he earns a spot or earn some playing time outside of special teams this season. We also heard, I forgot who it was, talk about Elias Williams at one
Yeah,
point.
Al Davis did.
It's probably Al Davis. Yeah, we heard Al Davis talk about Elias Williams, and I really hope he's not still 261 pounds as a defensive tackle. Like, he needs to put on some weight still. But there's been a lot of good things said about him. So I'm not saying those guys are gonna play much this year. I mean, Elias Williams maybe could if there's still some questions there in that position group. But no, I don't disagree at all. Nick Rodriguez is definitely the simplest answer. I want to say James Madison will do the same, but it looks. I feel like it looks kind of hard for him right now to get a lot of looks. But again, there are some unproven players in that receiver room. So I mean, him included, but there could be an open spot for like the fourth or fifth guy that James Madison could take. So I like that pick as well.
All right. Last one I got for you. This one is difficult because there's like nothing to base it off of, and there's a whole host of other factors that play into it. But what do you think is the highest, if at all, Mizzou gets into the AP poll and or college football play poll at some point this season?
Oh man. Okay. I think the main factor is the quarterback position. I think it's going to rely a lot on Bo Pribula. That's not anything crazy. I don't know if this team, like off the top of my head, is a playoff team. I think a lot would have to go right. You'd have to sweep that trio of home games with Alabama, Texas A&M, and South Carolina. And I don't think I foresee that happening. Now, obviously, the odds would probably be higher than they are this year than last year because they're at home. But at the same time, that makes a game like Auburn, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt a lot trickier because those teams aren't bad at all. They, arguably got better or stayed the same. So I don't know if I could put a number on it, but I would say maybe that mid range, like that 15 to 20 in the AP top 25. Maybe if they could sweep that trio of games, they're going to have the resume. They're going to have the resume to get in. They just would have to not lose a bad one. But let's hypothetically say they do, they do win those, and then you can drop, like, if they're in a crazy world where they're undefeated going into Oklahoma, you can lose to Oklahoma and Arkansas and maybe, get in there, or you could afford to lose Vanderbilt or Vanderbilt, Kansas. You can't lose, but you could afford to lose Vanderbilt and maybe still sneak into the playoffs. But that would obviously be the dream scenario. When you think, I feel like on social media, when you see people predicting records, it's a lot of like between 7-5 and 9-3, which feels like a pretty safe bet to me in that range. But I think to give you a number, I'll say like 17, right in the middle of my range.
Okay. I put down 16. I agree with a lot of what you said there. Like, I think they finished in the top 25, but yeah, I don't see them. Well, here's another one. Do you think they'll be in the preseason AP poll? Because I don't think so.
No.
Yeah,
probably not.
It's been pretty low volume of preseason or way too early polls that they've made. I think the only notable one that I've seen has been like ESPN Analytics. So there's that. Okay, what's your last question for me?
Yeah, another interesting one that's kind of hard to base anything on because there's a lot of players that I'm asking for, or not asking for, but that would fall into this category that we don't really know anything about, and it's a pretty wide net. But do you have one guy that you feel like nobody is talking about when it comes to the Missouri football discourse that you think is going to not only earn a spot on this roster, but contribute? And it could be, when I say contribute, it could be a third string, it could be a backup guy, but just someone that nobody that has always caught your eye. Maybe he's been around for a few years, and you think his time is now. Anyone that catches your eye that falls into that category?
I mean, look, I think Tavares Jones can be good. I think, like you said, if we're really talking about like getting snaps that people don't realize, I think Tavares Jones could fit into that. I think it begs the question why he was in the 2022 class and has yet to see playing time, and even as a 4-star prospect. Other than that, I'm trying to run down the line here. Um,
I can give you an
I'd probably
assist. I can give you an assist because there's two names that
okay,
came to my head. One was
okay,
Brian Huff. Brian
okay,
Huff at linebacker. I believe he's a red shirt, probably a red shirt freshman.
yeah,
Yeah, red shirt freshman. I think he's. I mean, he had really good high school tape, so
mm-hmm,
that could be a guy that maybe I guess not a similar path to Nick Rodriguez. That's a bad way to word it. But if there's a young linebacker that's not Rodriguez, or Beasley, I feel like it could probably be him. And then
sure,
I feel like Shamar McNeil has also waited his turn
yeah,
in the cornerback room, and uh, so I mean maybe him as well. It's kind of again kind of a hard thing to predict, I guess, but um, I don't know. It seems like the last 2 years there have been players who have kind of ascended from nowhere and ended up earning a spot on this team. So I feel like there's going to be at least one of those guys that does so to cement himself a role.
yeah, yeah. I absolutely see that. So that was fun.
Was fun.
So that's going to round out this episode here. But we got a lot of stuff. We're pumping up the YouTube content here as we get into July, because in just over 2 weeks here, fall camp will start. Next week, Eli Drinkwitz and 3 players will speak at SEC Media Days. And then after that, we're pretty much up and running. So gonna try to have a lot of YouTube content coming your way. So make sure you check out that channel. If you subscribe to us, it really helps us out. Can hopefully help us travel to some more away games and continue to bring more content over there. So appreciate you doing that, and hope you do the same for the rest of our coverage over at Missouri Tigers on SI.